Hey, it's Kevin with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. And on today's episode, I am going to be joined by Kurt Heusner, and he is the CEO at Endpoint Automation Solutions. And we're going to learn a little bit about what Endpoint Automation Solutions is all about, but we're also going to talk about kind of the mid-market warehousing operators out there. We're going to give them some love today, and we're going to find out a little bit why there's some gaps in terms of technology, and technology that's suited for them, and how they can kind of bridge some of the gaps between their systems with this technology, and dive a little bit into that, and learn a little bit about how Endpoint is helping to serve them with some modularity and some plug and play solutions that I think are really key and vital for that market. So we're going to learn all about that from Kurt today and talk a little bit about warehouse technology solutions, of course, the thing that we love on this podcast. So Kurt, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thanks so much, Kevin, for having me. I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Absolutely. Happy to get you on and happy to talk about this because I think that, we see so much in the industry where solutions are, going after the big guys and things like that. But where's the love for, those SMBs? And we need that out there because there are so many SMBs that make up the warehousing space out there, definitely. So before we kind of dive into that, why don't you give us a brief overview of Endpoint and what it is that you all do?
Yeah, Endpoint Automation Solutions is intended to power warehouses and operational environments that are connected, intelligent, and human. And I really emphasize that human part of it
Yeah.
because it now and forever will have a human element to everything that happens in kind of the warehouse or the operational environments. I've even heard you say on some of your podcasts and other interviews. But we're here to kind of bridge the gap between the ERP system, which to me is kind of the brain
Mm.
of the business, and how do you connect that to the realities of the warehouse floor or the distribution facility or the manufacturing facility? And we want to do it in this, like you said, deliverable modular automation.
Mm.
So it's not, you have to bite everything off at one time. You can bite it off in bite-sized chunks and really attack the most important parts piece by piece. It gives you this data visibility. It integrates with other systems so that it can talk back and forth from the connection perspective. And it's meant to primarily be targeted at mid-market manufacturers, distributors, wholesalers, so they can run faster, be more accurate, be more connected as an operation, and compete in the international markets that have become so competitive and have so many different elements that affect their kind of operations.
Yeah, and
So go
oh,
ahead.
I was gonna say, yeah, I think that's fantastic, especially that compete portion, right? Because I think that it's hard for these mid market with all these technology solutions out there to, I guess, one, just navigate the vast array, and we talk often on the podcast about this kind of divide a little bit where the big guys, right, they got money to play with, right, and they got R&D teams and budget and things to do experiments, right? But when we get to that mid-market and these SMBs and things of that nature, it's hard for them to do that. They need like to put solutions in place where they can be effective immediately, right? So it's great to hear that you're allowing that and enabling some of that them to be able to compete with that level, because from a consumer perspective, right, the consumer doesn't care whether you're in market or big guy. They just expect the same thing from everybody, right, essentially. So very interesting there. So now tell us a little bit, because you mentioned the ERP as the brain kind of the business and the operation there, which I definitely agree with. And Endpoint in the past was kind of focused on ERP specifically, right? And this is kind of an evolution of the business now, because as my understanding is you see that there's kind of a gap between the ERP and the warehouse floor. So talk to us a little bit about what is that gap necessarily, and how are you trying to kind of bridge it?
Yeah, it's important. I think the ERP system, kind of just to complete that thought, it is like the brain to me, and
Mm,
the central nervous system is the warehouse, the factory, the whatever other operations. It's how do those connect into that brain to give it
for sure.
all the information it needs to run the business more effectively. Um, and so our beginnings as a company 35 years ago was really being an embedded WMS inside of a publisher's and ERP systems
Mm,
um, software. So it was embedded in and was kind of adjacent. But as you know, you only want to do so many things inside that ERP. You don't want to overcomplicate the things that it wasn't really set up to be able to do. And what we find is customers that, especially if they have growing complexity in their operational footprint, is they outgrow what they can do inside the ERP and really need to kind of come outside of it and integrate back in so they can do all the operational processes and complexities they need as they grow and add warehouses or add international or whatever, add complexity or products or SKUs. Is that they don't have to keep everything inside. It can integrate and put the correct information back into the ERP system, but it can outside of it do all the work that's necessary for people that are actually went running the warehouse. And I think sometimes there's a discontinuity between these two things in that there are
mm,
limitations in the ERP, which really the warehouse or other teams struggle with. And then conversely, they don't, the ERP or the financial system, you don't want all of these things to be managed inside of it. And so it creates
yeah.
this log jam between the two in what the objectives are of those organizations. And so, we're trying to balance that and make sure that it's the right things are done in the right place. And it's more of a living operational system as opposed to a single. Now, I think a lot of SMBs at the beginning, would love to keep it very simple and start with the ERP, and that's why we've been a great place to begin for many of these companies.
Hmm.
But as they grow in complexity over time, they typically struggle with that. And as you've probably seen, many of them decide to change ERPs or change warehouse management systems as that complexity mounts, as opposed to trying to figure out plug and play components that can grow with them uh, as a growing complexity and capabilities needed.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's an interesting point there, right? Because I teach a course to students about ERP actually, and we talk about the difference there between doing a complete suite kind of approach versus best of breed, right? And I tell them that I'm like, even though your ERP can do everything, essentially, it doesn't mean it does everything very well, right?
That's
So
right.
so I think it's really interesting, and seeing that gap too, and I think just the evolution of technology itself in the warehouse space certainly allows for more flexibility to be able to do these things, and you want to have that flexibility from your system, which it sounds like you're enabling to happen, right? I'm curious. I mean, tell us a little bit about from your perspective, because you've been in the software space for some time, right? And you recently joined Endpoint earlier this year. So tell us a little bit about what drew you to this space specifically, and kind of what do you see in the market as the opportunity here?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. I've been in technology for what is now about 40 years of my career
Mm,
between hardware, software, and services. And so I've seen that intersection point where these things come together in the real world for the humans that are using them, and in which it was intended to continue to help with productivity or help them do their jobs more effectively or whatever it may be. So I've always been drawn to these spaces where there are these complex operational issues that are happening and growing in complexity every day and
Mm.
growing in required agility, as you were kind of just referencing. And when that meets the human, and what is the impact of those two things coming together? So to me, a warehouse is kind of the heartbeat of the supply chain. And for decades, kind of the mid-market segment has been underserved. To your point, they've tried to use overly complicated systems to be able to
Yeah,
manage what they're doing. Or conversely, as you've kind of referenced, I think in other podcasts, they'll run off of uh, spreadsheets and
for sure. Paper. Yeah,
are people would be surprised how many companies are still just using basically no technology or very limited
yeah.
technology within their space, especially in these SMB and mid market spaces. So we're trying to help them to take those either manual processes and add their capabilities that help them to automate and make more intelligent the platform for them, and do some of the work that they can, could do easier. Or we're trying to simplify for those that have overly complicated and bought too high of a platform from an either ERP or even the warehouse management capabilities, and bring those together to fit their business for what they actually do and what does it really solve. And where we're focused is on outcomes. What is the
Mm.
outcome you're trying to achieve? I think sometimes it's so focused on processes or mimicking processes, whether they're good or bad, it doesn't really get at what's the outcome I'm trying to drive through this process on a consistent basis. And am I getting that based on either the technology or the humans that are kind of bringing that together to kind of deliver on behalf of the customer? So I think there's a very large opportunity for this kind of bringing those things together, setting the right expectation, but not also overdoing the technology, because
Mm.
that happens too, is when you have too many things taking place and it actually confuses your operation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's such a great point because there's like a stark or I would say there's like a wide spectrum of where warehouses are from a technology perspective, right? Like you said, I mean, it's you look around and you see the the marketing out there around all these warehouse technologies. You go to trade shows and conferences and you see all the latest robots and all these things, right? You would get the impression as an outsider to the industry that like, oh, all warehouses are like high tech, right? And high technology, and it's still a very low percentage, right? And to your point, I mean, there's still operations out there that are working off spreadsheets or picking off paper in some instances. And I think it's very interesting that there's such a wide gap there, but such a big opportunity to improve those operations with some technology to help to make the job better for the human, as you referenced a couple times, and just make that efficiency and effectiveness even better as well. So I'm curious what you're seeing in the market, especially this mid market sector. Like, what are you seeing are some of the biggest challenges for them to adopt some of this technology and kind of take that step in the first place?
Yeah. No, first, I do think there's a recognition that the mid market and SMB customers are at this kind of massive technology inflection point.
Yeah.
It's not like they can no longer, there's too many parts of their organization to be effective for their customers where they have to use technology because they have to integrate with other systems or or with the customer more directly, digitally, or whatever it may be. So I do think there's less and less um, aversion to it, to technology, but it's what technology do I need and how complex of a technology infrastructure do I need to put in place? I mean, it's across, their challenges are multi-channel fulfillment and labor shortages and rising service expectations.
Hmm.
Um, but without the enterprise budgets or the IT resources to kind of do that, as you referenced before. So what's happening now is the technology curve has caught up with the reality, and whether it's cloud or WMS or modular automation or AI analytics or robotics, they have to consider what are the things that are going to help them to scale and change their business and be able to compete on an international basis, national or international basis. So Endpoint focuses here because the segment needs practical automation,
Mm.
not over-engineered systems. Um, we want things that can be deployed quickly, easily integrated, and scaled as they kind of grow, and you can consume it as you go. And so I think too many try and bite off too much too quickly. It doesn't really fix that problem that they were intending to fix, and it causes other problems across the entire workflow that they didn't need to fix. So what we're trying to do is take a really pragmatic view of it and say, let's look at where are the struggles that you are having, and how do we address those first? Because the more that something comes in and is successful in bite-sized chunks, then you build confidence in the staff and the team to keep adding automation that's relevant to them. If you do there are too many projects, as you know, that have tried to go for more of a big bang
Sure.
and taken on too much, and they fail too often. And it's largely because they don't bring the humans along with it. The other thing I would say, Kevin, is that in the mid-market space and through all out my technology career, I've always found that if you just ask the people in your company, where are the problems?
Yeah.
They can very easily identify them. And they can even tell you what their context of what they know that can fix some of those things. So I think if you approach it more from how do I empower them to fix that, as opposed to trying to, overlay what others may think is the actual problem that's causing it. I think you can create this kind of bottoms up human support of what you're trying to do and get the benefits of it. And there are too many times it's kind of a top down initiative,
Yeah.
and they just don't bring the employees along with what they're trying to do, and it becomes difficult. So where I find that comes together the most is mid-market. When you get into bigger companies, they have lots of people to manage big projects and big initiatives and all those kind of things. SMB and mid-market, it's the people doing the work that are having to figure out how to do this. And so it's all about trying to help them to kind of address those pragmatically.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of great points in there. And I think the first one that stuck out to me, I mean, when you think about some of these technologies, and if you try to go too big too soon, right, like you talked about there, and it doesn't work, it fails, and there's a lot of discouragement and frustration that surrounds that prevents them from wanting to take something else on, right? And a lot
Yeah.
of this stuff too that's out there now, I mean, some of it in the scale and the investment that you're doing for some of these technologies now that are in the space, I mean, there could make or break your job if you're the one making the
Yeah.
decision, right?
Yeah.
And so that's also a daunting thing to handle. So I think your point is spot on, where there's often a disconnect between, say those that walk on the carpet, right, versus those that walk on the concrete in the warehouse, right, and getting them involved and really understanding those problems, I think is such a key factor to be able to do that. And I love the approach of having kind of this modularity and plug and play, and like as you said, add things as you go, as you're ready for them. So I guess talk to us a little bit about that part from Endpoint's perspective. How does that work, right? You bring Endpoint in, and then like you can add different parts to it as you're ready to do that. Talk to us a little bit about how does that evolution work for a company.
Yeah, if you don't mind me backing up just to something you just said, though, is
Sure, go ahead.
when we find that a project is failing, many times it's because of this lack of continuity between what you were describing, the people walking on the carpet,
Mm-hmm.
the managers managing in between that, and the people actually doing the work on the way, either warehouse floor or some other part of the organization. It's the lack of alignment around what you're trying to get out of the technology and what outcome you're trying to produce is where I find we spend a lot of time either evaluating when something's gone wrong or trying to talk a customer through proactively to make them successful as they're about to embark on the technology implementation. Because if they aren't aligned, something will crop its head up at certain points
Mm-hmm.
because decisions are made for different reasons at different layers, and it may cause that misalignment that we find um, um, causes projects to go awry or not meet the objectives of it could be nothing to do with the technology. It has to do with the alignment of what they were thinking they were going to get from the technology or process or whatever it may be. So I apologize for going back to it, but
No, no, no.
it's
That's
super important.
Yeah. I mean, that's perfectly fine, and I think that I mean that resonates with me. And I had a project in my career where there was a disconnect with what was actually happening on the floor versus the above, and it hurt us badly. Someone that made a decision at a high level that they didn't really understand the impacts or the ramifications of what putting certain settings on in the system would be, and it really damaged some relationships with customers because it seriously impacted our fill rate and things of that nature. So I mean, it's really important to understand that and call that out, because I think that that synergy and that understanding of what is actually happening, I think is such a critical point to have that success with these projects.
Yeah,
So yeah,
absolutely.
so tell us a little bit about kind
Well, and
of
that kind
the
of gets into
sure.
the modularity, frankly, that you were
Yeah.
talking about is, there's these, warehouses, distribution, manufacturing facilities are living environments. They're
Mhm.
constantly changing. I think, in today's world, um, my belief is the companies that have built into their architecture of their business agility are the ones that are going to succeed over a long term. Those that don't may be optimized for today's world, but in 2 or 3 years, as things accelerate and other competitors come into the environment or what have you, is that they may be in one day and out the other. And so agility is one of those critical pieces. And so that's one, is that I just am a believer that in all businesses today, you have to be agile and you have to figure out how the components of your architecture can change if they need to at an accelerated pace. COVID was a perfect example of proving this to people. They had to change on a dime,
Yeah.
and could they? And market forces, tariffs could change completely a company's entire supply chain in a current environment, and they may have to adapt and adjust, or it could be fundamentally a problem for them. So I think first is I believe businesses have to have this architecture of agility and figure out what are the modular pieces of that And so as I came into the organization, we were fairly typical WMS. We sold, really, everything across the process, let's call it.
Sure.
Everybody has a little bit of variability. What I saw customers trying to do is implement the whole thing when they really had a problem with one piece and they were really overbuying for what they needed at that time. And so I felt like that was almost creating the problem I was advising against, which was
Mm,
modularity
yeah.
and in the architecture. And so we felt like it was important to actually break our portfolio into these more modular workflow pieces so that they could concentrate on how do they become best of breed in that and how do they build agility into that component and then move to other pieces as it's really relevant. So we're trying to help them to create this kind of agile uh, architecture and be a part of that versus basically pushing our portfolio against that, which is loading more technology over the customer than they really needed. So that's kind of informing what we're trying to do so that they can really go through transformations in smaller chunks as opposed to
Mm,
larger transformations, which are really complicated and hard to do in the real world. And maybe you don't need to do because it's only a section of of what you're doing that needs to change to upgrade to a new best of breed or to accommodate, kind of what you're trying to do going forward in how your business has changed. So that's at the core of the kind of the philosophy we're trying to embark on, and then be able to advise customers in that way.
yeah, and I think that's so smart, right? Because, like you said, you go for everything at once, or like that's the only option to go for everything at once, right? Then that can become a little overwhelming in a sense, right? You're like, well, I'm just worried about this one process that I have right now, and but then I have this, and then I have this, and then I'm trying to do a little bit of everything, and then it just doesn't go so well, right, as it could, or be as effective as potentially. So I love that approach to be able to scale it as you need to scale it, and add on different components when you need to add them on, and I like that idea too of the bite-sized kind of projects, right, where it's not one large scale project that is, like you said, can be daunting, can make it much harder, can be a bigger mountain to climb. Instead, you're just making it, smaller hills, I guess
Yeah,
we can
yeah,
say. But and I want to talk too about, because you mentioned the human a couple times in here, right? Which I can tell is that's a very important part of this for you. So tell us a little bit about kind of the balance that you see, and how do you advise the balance between the human, which is a very critical component of a warehouse operation, versus the technology that you're bringing in. How do you find that balance, and how do you enable that human to benefit from the technology that you're bringing
yeah. It's a really complicated. Of course,
in?
you're
Sure.
working with that company to try and figure out where is the balance because it could be that the barrier to it is that the human has a fear of the technology, and so they don't really uh, even try and accept that it could help them to be more effective in what they're doing. So it's always to me, the technology is intended to sit in the background and help the person to do their job more effectively,
Mm,
whether that's physically, whether it's through information, through let's call it predictive as we continue to go more towards kind of AI. What is it enabling in that person to do more effective, faster, better, than they could have done yesterday? Too many times, unfortunately, we just and in particular related to kind of training and onboarding of humans doing using this technology, we just throw it out there, or we just quickly train them on here's the feature functions,
yeah.
but it doesn't help them to understand, well, wait, but that didn't help me. I was doing those things yesterday. What's new and different that's going to kind of help me to be more effective with it? So I think we're trying to analyze that better and understand where's the work that needs to be done by that smart human that is adaptable to the situations in the moment, and where are those repetitive processes that really they didn't want to do or don't like to do as much either. It's where's the trade-off between those two things? Where are the repetitive things that you can get them to give up and not want to have to do and want to have to do anymore, and focus on where the things are that their knowledge and experience and so forth benefits your ability to be effective. And so it's a process you have to go through to kind of understand that. But I think it also diffuses a little bit of this future fear of
Mm.
like everything's going to be automated.
Yeah.
No, everything's not going to be automated. Not AI doesn't take over everything. I do get bothered in today's environment where I think it's over publicized, that companies are laying off because of AI. Well, I don't know. Maybe,
Mm.
maybe,
Yeah.
I'd like to see how AI has specifically taken out the significant numbers of people that we're talking about, or was that just bad human planning for against their business? So, I think the humans that are there um, should be fairly confident if they can embrace it and figure out ways that it can help them to be more effective and demonstrate that. Then I think there's a real benefit for this coming together between the two. And where you see it come together really well, it's very extremely rewarding because you see the human is excited about what they're able to do differently, and the
Mhm.
technology just takes away things that are meant to be simplified through the use of that technology. So, um, that's what we're striving to kind of be able to find, is that balance in between those two things.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's really interesting perspective there because I think it is sometimes especially in a warehouse environment, right? There's a lot of repetitive tasks, right? There's a whole kind of flow state that employees get into, right? Because they're doing the same kind of thing every day, right? And they get used to that, and then if you kind of disrupt that without any real explanation or understanding, whether it's better or not, there's still going to be some resistance there, right? So I think marrying kind of the communication and the why, right? Like, why are we bringing this
Yeah,
technology in
yeah,
to the understanding of that employee is such a key factor in that change management phase of the any technology or any change implementation that's happening in that operation. But I think that's really great to your point, right? That we want to make sure that they can be more effective, right? And this technology is making their lives better, essentially, right? They can be more productive, they can be more comfortable, they can be easier. And I think, as long as you're communicating that across, you certainly can find that balance for them, right? To make things effective for them, which I think is really important. So
it's kind
now,
of this
sure,
it's kind of this change management aspect of it
yeah,
that people don't concentrate on enough. I had an interesting call with the CEO of one of our customers who his approach was very different than I find most companies doing. Most of them look for where is the most significant gain that they think they can gain in technology,
hmm,
being implemented, technology systems processes kind of being implemented. He took a different perspective. He was afraid that they were on a multi-year journey and they were very behind for their industry.
mm,
And what he did instead is he polled his employees by where are the things that you hate to do,
mm.
and that if we got rid of it, none of you would care, if we were automating or
Yeah,
whatever it may be. And they targeted and prioritized a set of those. And that's where they started with their technology implementation. So it was a bit of that. I thought it was a really interesting approach to change management. And instead of trying to take the big, most relevant processes, they took some of the smaller, but processes that people hated to do within their warehouse, and they automated that and showed that they could do it there, and then work their way up to some of the most complex, most important processes, so they could kind of gain their confidence as they went along the project. And I thought that was really fascinating. I haven't seen somebody do that before.
Yeah, and I love that. I think that's a great idea because you know that. I mean, if they hate doing it, right, and there's a majority that says they hate doing it, like what you're gonna have very little resistance or
Right,
challenge at all to
right.
do that, and I think that's a smart way to do it, and probably I imagine too, you know, on the I guess the opposite end, right, the things that they enjoy doing or they love doing is probably something that needs like that human touch anyway, right? Or
Yeah.
you know has a special kind of attention to it if they're enjoying doing that task.
Yeah,
So
it's more
yeah.
nuanced if they're likely doing that. And so, yeah, I think so. You have to be a little more careful about where the interaction is between technology and the human, where it feels like it's more personal to them.
Mm, yeah, yeah, and I love that example. So thank you so much for sharing that. So now as we kind of look towards the future or maybe the present right now, you guys have something going on called the Great Warehouse Upgrade. I love the name of this. So tell us a little bit about what is this and what is Endpoint offering to these businesses that are looking to maybe add some technology to their operations.
Well, I think as I think you've even talked about other times on your podcasts, and you know, a lot of customers are perplexed by the capex investment to invest in technology
Sure.
and be able to, how do I approach that? And so there are ways that you can basically finance and take advantage of tax laws and combine those two things into the ability to accelerate your purchasing into warehouse technologies. So at least that part of the barrier has been kind of removed. And so, we're kind of advising some of our customers. We'll work with them to, be able to finance the solution that they're after, and to do it in a way that's more balanced. I've even heard you talk about, some of the customers that are taking advantage of robotics as a service.
Sure.
It's
Yeah.
this way of spreading the payments across an investment curve, but also being able to take advantage of near-term tax advantages that are built into the code, that into the tax code that I find a lot of companies just don't know about. Now, of course, we advise them to talk with their tax advisors so they
Of course. Yes.
understand the ramifications, and we're not advising them on that. But there are a lot of opportunities that they just don't know about or take advantage of today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you guys are, so you're offering, I guess through the end of the year, 2025, right? To have 90 days, no payment and 0% financing. And also there's, I guess, potential eligibility for section 179, which I think is really interesting. When you guys told me about that, I did a little Googling research myself. I was like, oh, how does this work from this perspective? Because I never thought about it in that perspective. So how can people kind of take advantage of that and learn more about Endpoint?
Yeah, you can engage with any of our partners or us more directly, either directly at our website or with our team. And we'd be glad to kind of help to talk through how we would approach it. But yeah, we're pretty excited about trying to help companies to get a jump start. I do think this uh, digital divide is recognized now. I think, and companies know that they need to take steps to kind of move in a direction of more automation. And this is trying to remove some of the barriers to kind of getting there. So, the other thing Kevin Wim talked about, but is the more you have digital native young people,
Mm,
over half of the workforce today are pretty digital native in what they expect from the company or the companies they buy from, they work for or buy from. And so if you aren't one of those companies that's implemented technology, I think it's harder to get the skills and experience and knowledge and excite a younger community on getting into the manufacturing sector or the distribution sector or
yeah.
whatever. That so it will hold you back from trying to being able to get the right people to join your organization with sustainability. And even, we find today this succession planning of being able to hand off the business. There are, you know, maybe millions of business owners that are trying to hand over their business to
Yeah.
somebody else from a succession perspective. And there just isn't the interest that there has been because of either they haven't done these things to modernize the business or have held it back, and um, so they can't attract the people that would want to run that type of business in the future. So there's lots of reasons I think that are market forces that are creating this, where owners need to consider technology and how they take advantage of it in their organization going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's such a great point because they're, like you said, this generation coming into the workforce and the generations that are following them too, that will be coming into the workforce have just grown up in a digital environment. And giving them a job that lacks technology or has technology that lacks user experience and user design and things of that nature is going to be is not very exciting to them, right? And is going to be a challenge for them to I think work with. And I think they also seem to be very focused on choice as well, right? And having challenges with technology or frustration. Like I use the example in my classes when we talk about this, where I ask the class, I'm like, okay, if you download an app from the app store and it's you open it for the first time and it's difficult to use, like what do you do, right? And they're kind of like, I never use it again, or I look for a different app, right? So when they come into the workforce and that's like their mindset around technology, right, is that like, if it's not user friendly, like I'm using something else, right? And you come into a job, you're kind of stuck with that technology. They're not going to last too long, I don't think, in that type of
Yeah.
environment, right? So great point on great points all around on why we need this technology, right? And how do we bridge kind of this gap that we talked about in the beginning? So really interesting to talk to you. And for those mid-market businesses, or I guess any businesses that are listening, you have something going on right now called the Great Warehouse Upgrade. Which I love the name of. So tell us a little bit about what does that mean? Because you got this promotion kind of running through the end of the year where people can really kind of take advantage of your offerings from something that you're offering from a promotional perspective, but also from like a tax incentive too. So tell us a little bit about that.
We're trying to remove the barriers to customers making that initial investment and being able to start their journey, towards automation. And so we're providing Kevin a kit, a tax savings kit, where the customer, we can validate for them that they can give to their tax person the equipment, the software, the implementation services, the hardware that they have invested, and they have an ability. They expanded last year. The government expanded to spending of 2.5 million per company, and so that is fully uh, tax full tax benefit of Section 179. Of course, you're going to want to get the advice of your tax advisor, but this is a pretty unique opportunity to, before year end, get in and invest and begin the journey, like I said.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a great offering, and certainly great to call out the awareness and visibility around that section 179 and that potential deduction before the end of the year, because I think that's really, we oftentimes get a little lost at the end of the year, like focused on holiday volume and things like that. But, we need to start,
Else.
yeah, definitely. We need to start thinking about those things ahead. And if we can be strategic from a financial perspective, I think that's a great way to invest in some technology and get yourself ready for 2026. So fantastic that you guys are offering that. And if people are interested in learning more about Endpoint, what's your website? What's the best place to do that?
Our website is endpointas.com, and you can engage us there, and we'll look forward to having a conversation with you.
All right, fantastic. And it's been an absolute pleasure to get you on the podcast here today, Kurt, and really appreciate your insights and sharing those with us. We will share all the information about Endpoint in the show notes here, as well as at thenewwarehouse.com. So make sure you reach out to Endpoint and take advantage of the great warehouse upgrade. I'll say it again. I love that name for the promotion. It's very good. So appreciate your time once again on the show today, Kurt.
Thanks so much, Kevin. I appreciate it.
Hey guys, thank you so much for tuning into today's video here on our YouTube channel, The New Warehouse Podcast, and I appreciate you tuning in. If you liked what you saw, make sure you subscribe to our channel, and if you like this video in particular, make sure you like it as well. And if you want to get this great t-shirt that you see in the video behind me, Warehouses Are Sexy, head to warehousesAreSexy.com and get your own.